Thus, the birth of the Taurus ring. That's your hint, just in case you were wondering. I would see images the way several people would see a cloud. From each individual viewpoint, one would see a leaf, the fluttering of a butterfly wing, or an angelic being in flight in the same carving. I would allow myself to see more than one image and fold them into one seamless carving. Each piece was a one-off, left to the viewer's imagination in each gemstone. This was unique in that from the perspective of the art, for art's sake itself, an artist generally creates a whole image to stand alone and be a full expression of a vision or statement. I was creating art that I felt was only half done, but on purpose with regard to design. In other words, I would create just some of the expression, leaving lots to the imagination of a jewelry designer or goldsmith to come along and complete the inspiration. Each jeweler would see something completely different. And the next chapter is where I share the art of 7 individually unique jewelry designers' use of my gemstones. The Fantasia series is the foundation where recognition as a gem artist came of age. I was beginning to win gem cutting awards in the US and abroad. So unique was my use of chalcedony and agate that I was beginning to be featured regularly on natural and international trade magazine covers. This was the launching as a professional gem artist and an all-around lapidarist. To this day, I still create this style, even though they are time-consuming, and most are one of a kind. The good news is each piece is a standalone original, unique in material and style. The downside is our industry is based on numbers of reproduction one can do with the same size gemstone in a multi-produced precious metal setting, thus producing hundreds, if not thousands, of the same look. This is not possible to create with the Fantasia. Each is literally a one of a kind. Though I love the style and inspiration of the Fantasia series, I would hit resistance from jewelry designers since it was not easy to reproduce more than one of each piece. For years, jewelers would come by my booth in the Tucson Gem Show and say, "I just love your gem carvings, but I need to create a mounting in gold each time." Hearing this over and over again in my mind, I started thinking how I could create a unique, one-of-a-kind look that is also collaborated and reproducible. Thus, the birth of the Taurus ring. That's your hint, just in case you were wondering. The story goes back to my early childhood. Ever since I was around 5 years old, I could close my eyes and see the large green circle with a black center and purple on the edge around the green ring. As children do, thinking everyone could see this image, I would play with my eyes closed, moving it up, down, right to left, and in circles, thinking this was pretty cool. In science, it is called the torus, a toroid shape in nature. I came to know what this image was later in my late teens and mid-20s from my mystical experiences on one end and my education in the science of mineralogy. It is the most prevalent form in which our known universe forms into. From the deepest of space, spiraling nebula and planetary solar systems to the very micro world of the atom field of electrons and protons, circles inside of circles like waves on the beach, hurricanes and tornadoes born of wind and water. Just venture into your garden and you will see almost every flower there is a Taurus ring. Look further and it is the rings on the tree, the unfurling of a fern frond, to many sea creature shells. Nature can be so factual and circling and spiraling everywhere one looks. Just look into the eyes of us humans and there is the Taurus ring as the window to the soul. Fast forward, around 1982, I kept dreaming about setting a gemstone inside of a gemstone. I was infatuated with this concept. It started out with carving an internal hollow ball inside a gemstone and then mechanically setting the metal in the bubble, then setting the gemstone inside the gold that was set in the larger stone. This worked, but had very obvious flaws in the design idea. First, when you drill and hollow out a bubble in a traditional faceted gemstone, you've also interrupted the path of light in this reflective space, so that all you then see is this bubble and loss of brilliance. The second downside is you have to set the gold into the outside stone first by reverse rivet into the bubble space. Then attempt to hammer set the center stone into the gold that is set in this outer stone. Need I say more? Other than that, causing damage was always possible around the attempt to hammer set a gemstone into the gold setting that is already being held by a crystalline gemstone body. But not giving up on the idea of achieving a gemstone inside a gemstone, my innovation marched on in other trials and errors. Then along comes a chance over a decade later in 1996. A goldsmith by the name of John Langenfeld came to me with an idea for a design he was working on for the AGTA Spectrum Jewelry Design Contest. It was not related to what I had been attempting to do with setting a stone inside of a stone. He had designed a concept where he wanted me to carve pieces of a circle in amethyst to border his inner aspect of the jewelry design he had in mind. I knew amethyst would seem dull in a carved tube because there is not enough mass to hold a strong amethyst color. It would be more of a pale violet, almost like a Rose de France color. As he and I were discussing how to give this a richer color and more life, I suggested we do a pavilion on the curve. So imagine a long baguette style cut gemstone, but instead of it being rectangular and straight, I would carve it with a circular curve. As I was creating this piece for John, I had the eureka moment. If I had continued the curve into a complete circle and closed the ends, I would have this perfect reflection with the classic inner cone and the hole in the center. The torus ring was born. It answered every shortcoming of my early attempts. The hole in the center with the internal cone maintained the perfect reflection without a hole being visible in the reflections. Actually, with the curved cone, light would bend, condense, and reflect in ways a classically faceted stone could never achieve. The second answer to a perplexing issue was I could set the center gemstone in a bezel set tube with a hole rivet and mechanically set it into the hole of the torus ring. Brilliant. I should add here that it's not as though from this eureka moment I just sat down and created one. I must have cut and experimented with angles and cuts in over 24 pieces to get a really unique gemstone that was literally brilliant and beautiful to behold. And finally, I had answered the third requirement, that it could be calibrated and repeatable in the same size, shape, and gemstone material. I had finally achieved what I thought was the perfect unique fantasy gemstone that would set the industry on fire. So I thought at this point. So off I go to Tucson to show off my new cut. The year was 1997. To say the least, it was not a big seller. As a matter of fact, the designers, the jewelry store owners, and the goldsmiths all looked at it and would say with reservation in their voice, "Interesting." I would get comments like, "Gee, what do you put in the hole in the center?" Or, "How do you set the gemstone in the center of the hole?" Or even, "How do you set this stone in the setting?" The hardest response was, "I like the cut, but my customer is so conservative." Those first couple of years, the torus ring cut was not a big seller, and I experienced a lot of resistance from the jewelry industry because I believe it was so outside the box. So, person by person, I would explain. The hole in the center is to set a gemstone in. This I've left for the jeweler to create with. I would also explain how I would set a bezel set gemstone attached to a tube rivet into the torus ring. To make it easy, I would offer the service to the intrepid goldsmiths who did not trust their own skills to attempt this. Plus, I would demonstrate that setting a Taurus ring cut stone is actually the way one sets a traditional gemstone with an even girdle. No different, except you can set it lower in a mounting since it is only half the depth of a conventional gemstone pavilion. Because the look and feel was so different, it was extremely hard for many jewelers to wrap their head around a cut that was completely novel and unique.